It feels strange to be talking about anything else right now with the news that President Carter has passed away.
Yeah, it's tough.
Yeah.
Especially at age 100, the longest-lived U.S. president.
It really makes you stop and think about the impact someone can have in a lifetime.
Absolutely. And in Carter's case, that impact went way beyond his presidency.
That's actually what we're going to deep dive into today, using the Carter Center's website, their own announcement about his passing as our guide.
A good choice, too, because most people, when they hear Carter, they think, Peanuts, Camp David.
Right. But there's this whole other legacy. I'll be honest, even I was surprised by how much the Carter Center does.
It's pretty remarkable. And the scope of it, too.
Just looking at their programs, peace initiatives, global health work, strengthening democracy, it's huge, GE.
And that comes straight from Carter's vision. The Carter Center's mission is waging peace, fighting disease, building hope.
Okay, so that wasn't just a catchy slogan. They actually, live by that.
No, it was at the core of everything Carter believed in, that these issues were all interconnected.
See, that's fascinating to me, because I've supported charities before, but usually they have, one focus, right?
Yeah. You get the animal shelters, the environmental ones.
Yeah.
But Carter saw how conflict and disease feed off each other.
So it's a vicious cycle. You can't have peace if people are sick, but being sick is harder if there's war going on?
Exactly. They create this downward spiral.
Yeah.
So Carter's thinking was, you got to tackle both, side by side.
Wow. Okay, so let's get specific. I'm on their website now, and their program map is mind-blowing. Over 80 countries.
And it's not just on paper. Carter was personally involved, even in his 90s.
Wait, really? Traveling the world, doing this work?
Absolutely. Meeting with leaders, working directly with communities. That hands-on approach is part of what makes him so unique.
I had no idea. Okay, so looking at their program list, the guinea worm eradication program caught my eye. Almost eradicated.
It's an amazing success story. Shows the power of long-term commitment and smart strategy.
Seriously. We haven't cured the common cold, but they're wiping out guinea worm. How is that even possible?
It's a parasitic infection. Spread through dirty water. Causes debilitating pain. Can last for months.
Oof. Sounds awful. So how did they go from millions of cases to practically zero?
A combination of things, really. They focused on educating people, changing behaviors.
Like teaching them to boil water, use filters.
Exactly. Simple stuff, but super effective. They also trained healthcare workers, treated cases.
It's amazing how sometimes the simplest solutions are the most powerful,
Absolutely. It wasn't just about filters. It was about empowering communities to take control of their own health.
And I bet the impact goes way beyond just not being sick anymore.
Oh, for sure. Less disease means a stronger economy, fewer kids missing school.
It makes you realize how interconnected everything is. We talk about these issues in the abstract, but it's people's lives.
Right. And Carter understood that. That's why his approach was so holistic.
Okay, so another thing that struck me, their work on the island of Hispaniola, Haiti and the Dominican Republic.
Now, that's a great example of how complex development work can be. Two countries sharing an island, facing such different challenges.
Haiti being one of the poorest countries in the Western Hemisphere, right?
Struggling with poverty, political instability. The Dominican Republic's doing better, but still faces its own issues.
So how do you even begin to help in a situation like that? Where do you even start?
Well, that's what I admire about the Carter Center. They tailor their approach to each country's specific needs.
So it's not just a one-size-fits-all solution?
Not at all. In Haiti, they focus on strengthening democracy, supporting human rights.
And in the Dominican Republic, what's the focus there?
More about things like environmental conservation, disease prevention, different priorities based on different needs.
It makes you appreciate the nuance, It's not as simple as just throwing money at a problem and hoping for the best.
You got to be smart about it, understand the context, work collaboratively with local communities.
Okay, before we wrap up this first part, there's one more program I want to touch on, the mental health program.
Now, that's an area where Carter was really ahead of his time.
I know, right? It seems so obvious now, the connection between mental health and well-being, but...
Back then, it was almost taboo. But he saw it as a human rights issue, fundamental to peace and development.
So what exactly were they doing? Was this like therapy sessions in war zones?
It's more about addressing the root causes. Reducing stigma, training healthcare workers, advocating for better policies.
I imagine in a lot of places, mental health is just ignored. Like it's not even seen as a real problem.
Exactly. So they're working to change that perception, integrate mental health into primary care.
It all ties back to that interconnectedness we were talking about earlier, doesn't it?
It really does. You can't have peace without health, and that includes mental health.
This is incredible. I'm learning so much, and we're just getting started.
Just scratching the surface. There's so much more to explore in Carter's legacy through the Carter Center.
Well, I'm ready for it. This deep dive is blowing my mind wide open.
Welcome back to our deep dive into President Carter's legacy. It's amazing how much the Carter Center accomplishes, isn't it?
It really is. You know, I was thinking, before we started this deep dive, if someone asked me what Jimmy Carter was known for, I'd probably say peanuts, maybe the Camp David Accords.
It's understandable. Those were big moments in his presidency.
But learning about the Carter Center has completely shifted my perspective.
It shows that a president's legacy isn't just about time in office.
Right, and that's what we're focused on today, right? His impact after the White House.
Absolutely. And in part one, we talked about their Hispaniola initiative, how they tailor their work to Haiti and the Dominican Republic.
And that really got me thinking, how do they handle all the different cultures and contexts in those 80 countries they work in?
That's such a key point. Cultural sensitivity is at the heart of everything they do. They know that effective development work can't just ignore local customs and beliefs.
So how does that actually play out? Can you give me an example?
Let's go back to the guinea worm eradication program. We talked about teaching people to boil water, use filters.
Yeah, simple stuff, but effective.
But in some cultures, water sources have spiritual meaning, or they have different beliefs about what causes illness.
So just telling them, boil it, you'll be fine, doesn't cut it.
Exactly. The Carter Center partners with local leaders, healers, community members. They make sure their message is culturally appropriate.
So it's like science meets cultural understanding.
You got it. And that applies to all their programs, whether it's promoting peace or strengthening democracy.
Okay, that makes sense. But how do they even decide which countries to work in? The world's full of problems.
Good question. They're very strategic about it. They consider the need, the potential for impact, whether there are strong local partners.
So it's not just about going where the need is greatest.
They also want to make sure their expertise can really make a difference. It's about finding the right fit.
Makes sense. Okay, so back to specific programs. We touched on their mental health program in part one.
And I think it's worth diving a little deeper into that one, especially with how much attention mental health is getting now.
It's like, finally, people are realizing it's just as important as physical health.
And Carter was saying that decades ago. He saw how neglecting mental well-being harms societies, fuels poverty, conflict.
It's still so stigmatized, though, even today.
Exactly, and that's why the Carter Center's work is crucial. They're not just treating illness, they're trying to change how we think about mental health.
Okay, so how do they do that? Give me the concrete steps.
Well, training healthcare professionals is a big one, but not just doctors, nurses. They train teachers, community leaders, even traditional healers.
Because people often turn to those they trust first,
Right.
before going to a fancy clinic.
Exactly. They meet people where they are, work within existing social structures,
I like that approach. It's practical.
and they also push to integrate mental health into regular healthcare. So it's not seen as something separate or shameful.
Breaking down those silos. I like it. You know, this whole deep dive, it's amazing, but honestly, it's a lot too.
80 countries, all those programs, it can be overwhelming.
Yeah, like it makes you realize how big the world's problems are, and I'm just one person.
But that's what's so inspiring about Carter's example. One person can make a difference.
That's a good point. Still, feels like a drop in the ocean sometimes.
And that's where the Carter Center comes in. They empower everyone to play a part, no matter how small.
Right, they have that Get Involved section on their website. At first, I thought it was just marketing fluff.
But it's genuine. They have tons of ways to contribute. Donating, volunteering, even just spreading awareness helps.
Okay, feeling slightly less overwhelmed now. So in part one, we talked about the guinea worm eradication program.
A real success story.
But what about conflict resolution? That seems even trickier than preventing a disease.
Oh, it definitely is. But the Carter Center has a whole program dedicated to it, drawing on President Carter's experience.
He did win the Nobel Peace Prize, after all.
Exactly. And they work at all levels, from local disputes to international crises.
So is it like sending Jimmy Carter in to negotiate peace treaties?
Sometimes, yes, but it's much broader than that. They understand that lasting peace isn't just about signing a paper.
It's about addressing the root causes of conflict, right?
You got it. Building trust, empowering communities to handle their own disagreements.
So it's like preventing the fire, not just putting it out afterward.
A great analogy. They often work behind the scenes, facilitating dialogue, mediating.
Give me an example. Where has this approach worked?
One region they've focused on is the Horn of Africa. Ethiopia, Sudan, Somalia, lots of conflict there, drought. political instability.
I remember seeing that on their website. It seems like a tough place to make progress.
It is. But they've been working there for decades, understanding the local dynamics, tailoring their approach.
So what does that look like, practically speaking?
One area they focus on is water management. In a dry region, access to water is life or death.
And if everyone's fighting over the same scarce resource.
Exactly. It can escalate quickly. So they help communities create fair systems for sharing water, preventing those tensions from boiling over.
Water management. Huh. Never thought of that as a peace-building tool.
It shows how interconnected everything is. Conflict's rarely about just one thing. It's tied to poverty, inequality, the environment.
So the Carter Center's addressing those deeper issues, not just the surface-level fighting.
That's exactly right. They're trying to create the conditions for lasting peace.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. We've covered so much ground. Health, peace building.
And it's all connected, just like Carter believed.
Right. But before we wrap up this part, we got to talk about their democracy promotion work.
Another crucial piece of the puzzle.
I remember we mentioned it in part 1, but I'm still a bit hazy on what it actually entails.
It's based on the idea that strong democracies are better at preventing conflict, promoting development.
So are they like going around setting up elections in countries that have never had them before?
It's more nuanced than that.
Yeah.
They focus on strengthening existing systems, making sure they're fair and transparent.
So things like training election officials, supporting independent media, that kind of thing.
Exactly. They also observe elections in over 100 countries, making sure they're conducted honestly.
That sounds delicate. Like, how do they do that without seeming like they're interfering?
It's a fine line. They always work with the consent of the host country, very diplomatically.
I can imagine some governments wouldn't be too happy about having their elections scrutinized.
There's definitely been pushback, but they believe in the power of democracy, even when it's hard.
That's pretty inspiring, to stick to your principles, even when it's risky.
It shows their commitment runs deep.
Okay, this has been an amazing deep dive so far. I'm learning so much about how the Carter Center approaches these complex global issues.
It's a testament to Carter's vision, his understanding that everything's connected.
Well said. I need a moment to process all this, though. It's a lot to take in.
It's heavy stuff, for sure.
Huh.
But hopefully you're also feeling inspired by the impact they're having.
Inspired is an understatement. I'm ready to join that Get Involved movement. Okay, we're back for our final deep dive into the legacy of President Carter, specifically his work through the Carter Center.
And it's been quite a journey so far, hasn't it? From eradicating diseases to promoting peace in some of the world's toughest spots.
Seriously, my view of Carter has totally changed. I mean, I knew he was a good guy, but this is next level stuff.
It's remarkable how the Carter Center brings together these different areas, health, peace, democracy.
Right. In the first 2 parts, we talked a lot about how they see those as interconnected, not separate issues.
Exactly. And that's what we're focusing on today, wrapping up with those big themes, conflict resolution and democracy promotion.
Those were the ones I had the hardest time grasping, honestly. Like, how does democracy actually prevent conflict?
Well, think about it this way. Imagine a country where people have no say in their government. No way to change things peacefully.
Oh, so all that frustration builds up and eventually it explodes.
Precisely. But in a functioning democracy, there are ways to voice your concerns, to negotiate, to find compromise.
So it's about creating that space for peaceful change, right? Instead of everyone resorting to violence.
That's the idea. And that's what the Carter Center's democracy program is all about.
Okay, now it's clicking. So they're not just setting up voting booths, they're doing a lot more than that.
Much more. They train election officials, support independent media, help citizens understand their rights.
Making sure the whole system works, not just having a one-time election.
Exactly. It's a long-term process. And they've observed elections in over 100 countries, providing independent assessments.
Wow, that must be tricky. How do you judge if an election was fair or not? Sounds subjective.
It's complex, for sure. They look at things like voter turnout, whether there was intimidation, if the results were credible.
So they're looking for signs of a healthy democratic process, not just ticking boxes.
That's it. And they provide recommendations for improvement, trying to make each election better than the last.
Can you give me a concrete example of where their democracy work has really made a difference?
Panama's a good one. Back in the 80s, they were under a military dictatorship. The Carter Center helped them transition to democracy.
Whoa, so they were involved in some pretty high-stakes situations. How did that even work?
They observed the 1989 elections there, which were seen as a crucial step towards democracy. Their presence helped ensure things were fair.
So it's not about forcing democracy on anyone, it's about supporting countries that want it.
Precisely. And they didn't just observe, they also worked to strengthen civil society, promote human rights.
It all ties back to that interconnectedness, doesn't it? You can't have peace without a functioning democracy.
Absolutely. And it's a long game. Building a democracy takes time, patience, constant effort.
Okay, that makes sense. Now let's switch gears back to conflict resolution. We talked about their work in the Horn of Africa in part two.
Where water management played a surprising role.
Yeah, that was fascinating. But what are they doing in other conflict zones around the world?
Their approach is always tailored to the specific context. For example, in the Middle East, particularly the Israeli-Palestinian conflict.
Oof, that's a tough one. How do you even approach a conflict that's been going on for generations?
It starts with building relationships, understanding everyone's perspective. They facilitate dialogue, try to find common ground.
So instead of picking sides, they're trying to get everyone talking to each other.
Exactly. It's about building trust, even when it seems impossible. They believe dialogue is always better than violence.
And sometimes that dialogue leads to breakthroughs, right? Like the Camp David Accords back when Carter was president.
It's not always easy, and there are setbacks. But they keep pushing forward, even when it's hard.
That takes a lot of guts. And faith in humanity, I guess, to believe that peace is actually possible.
And that brings us back to Carter himself. His life was a testament to that belief. He didn't just talk about peace, he worked for it.
Yeah, and that's what's so inspiring about the Carter Center. They're carrying on that legacy, showing that individuals can make a difference.
And that's what we hope you take away from this deep dive, too. That get involved message on their website. It's not just a slogan.
I know, right? It's a call to action. And after learning all this, I'm actually feeling hopeful. Like, maybe we can make the world a better place.
That's the spirit. President Carter may be gone, but his vision, his commitment to peace and justice lives on through the Carter Center and everyone they inspire.
Well said. This deep dive has been eye-opening, heartbreaking at times, but ultimately so hopeful. Thanks for taking us on this journey.
My pleasure. And remember, everyone has a role to play in building a better world. So what will your contribution be?